Greetings, Professor Hollingsworth. This is my assistant, Ben, with the slideshow. Next slide. Do any of you consider yourself to be a pet or animal lover? Not surprisingly, and as estimated by the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or ASPCA, a relatively large percent of the US population are pet owners, with 44% of people owning dogs and 35% of citizens owning cats. However, while it appears that many people in the US may be sympathetic to animals, it is still evident that over 1 million cats and dogs housed in shelters are being euthanized every year due to massive pet overpopulation. Next slide. Due to this contradictory issue, today I will be shedding light and bringing up the topic of pet overpopulation that has caused our shelters to be overwhelmed and millions of cats and dogs to be euthanized each year as shelters struggle to meet the demand for pet control and housing. Next slide. However, this pressing issue is not only one that concerns animal lovers, but the general US populace as well, as over $2 billion in tax payments go to animal control services that include euthanasia, roundup, temporary shelter, and housing. In fact, over 90% of animals housed in shelters are euthanized. Unfortunately, this massive taxpayer spending and needless animal euthanasia could largely be minimized if it were not for the massive pet overpopulation we see today. This pet overpopulation stems in part from the lack of adoptions, but also from the commercial pet industry and underground puppy mills that fuel the consumer's desire for adorable new breeds of puppies and kittens. This in turn leaves the adoption of shelter pets less appealing and only adds to the overpopulation of these animals. Next slide. To combat pet overpopulation, shelter overcrowding, animal euthanasia, and massive taxpayer spending, I would recommend that the most impactful solution source would be to eliminate the revenue appeal that fuels backyard breeding and puppy mills by choosing to rescue your pets from shelters, which would not only end illegal, inhumane breeding, but would also increase the number of rescue pet adoptions from our overcrowded shelters. Additionally, by choosing to rescue a shelter animal, you will be saving a life and relieving the shelter system of one less animal and obtaining a loving companion from a less expensive and more humane source as opposed to puppy mills. Furthermore, another way to prevent pet overpopulation is simply to not enable domestic breeds to populate by spaying and neutering your cats and dogs. Next slide. Yet, for this solution to become effective, we must take proactive action against puppy mills and pet overpopulation by 1, adopting from shelters, 2, avoiding adopting from commercial stores or puppy mills, and 3, preventing further pet overpopulation by spaying and neutering your cats and dogs. By actively avoiding and engaging in these aforementioned activities, not only will you be preventing more needless shelter euthanasia and cruel puppy mill breeding, but you will also be gaining a lifelong friendship and companionship with an animal who will not be destined to squander in the tax-fueled shelter system and be euthanized. Next slide. Ultimately, as a consequence to pet overpopulation, US citizens are forced to spend over $2 billion in tax payments for pet control, over 1 million healthy dogs and cats become euthanized, and backyard breeding and puppy mill industries contribute to the rising pet population and non-rescue adoptions, which only fuel their revenue. Next slide. In essence, pet overpopulation and the consequences it presents are real problems for all Americans that will require a collaborative solution to reduce the shelter crisis, tax payments, and most importantly, the millions of animal lives at stake. Whether you consider yourself an animal lover or not, I hope you now recognize how the effects of pet overpopulation affect all US citizens and the pets that we are responsible for. Last slide. Thank you for listening.